Here we are, January 15th. It is 9:34 a.m. Welcome to the first meeting in 2020 for LAFCo. And roll call, please.
2024.
2020. For the... Sorry, I forgot to pause. We were talking about future ideas.
Commissioner Sluden,
Present.
Archaki,
Present.
Scholes,
Here.
Roby,
Here.
Simon,
Here.
Matina, sorry.
Here.
And Sabatier.
Here.
Commissioner Brandon,
Here.
Lyons, Scott,
Lyons is actually walking in as we
Okay.
speak. If you can say here as you walk in. Here.
Here.
There you go. It's official, you're here.
and Parlitt.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to item number 2, approval of minutes. We had our November 20th, 2019 minutes in our packet. If there are no changes or any comments or questions, looking for approval of minutes.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Moving on. Item number 3, public comment. Anything that is not on our agenda, you can come up and talk to us, ask us, not ask us a question, make a comment. We cannot discuss it since it's not on the agenda. Anybody have a public comment? Seeing none, we're going to move on. Consent agenda. We have one item here today for the expenses for November and December 2019. Any questions or comments on item A, number 4?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve item A4.
4A.
For bills.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on. Number 5, Middletown Rancheria annexation of 109.38 acres, more or less, to the Caleome County Water District.
Mr. Chair, I will recuse myself, obviously, from this discussion.
We'll make sure to remember to call you back in.
Yes, please. Please do.
All right, thank you. And the item we are looking at is receive report and consider approval of LAFCo Resolution 2020-0001. And I'm going to pass that on to Mr. Benoit.
Okay, I'm just wondering how this works. Is it working? I guess it doesn't matter.
It should be, and if not, we can all hear you.
Okay.
Is anyone having issues hearing him?
The little red button, did you push my glasses off, will you?
It has to be up.
It has to be up.
It has to be up.
Ooh,
whatever.
now we hear you.
You're on.
Okay, I'm on. I just want to say that every year, the first meeting in January, I write the date of the last year. This happened to be the report that I did it on, so it's January 15th, 2020. It's hard to do. It's easier to do 19 on it. Anyway, as you recall, a few months ago, we approved an out-of-area service agreement for the 15 additional units that the rancheria is interested in constructing. There's also an older agreement for the 30 existing housing units out there. There's a housing shortage at the rancheria, so it necessitates this to come forward. We've been trying to get this property annexed for several years. There was an application in 2015 that did not work out. What we did was suggested a few things that they retained counsel to help, and their counsel representative is here. And so this annexation is an annexation of 109.38 acres, which is one parcel, that's trust land. And not that we do not regulate the tribe, we regulate the Caleome County Water District. So what they want to do is, this rancheria wants to have safe and reliable water, especially reliable water being in district. So, and the property is located just south of Middletown on Highway 29. You're probably, you may or may not be familiar with this, but it's on the, as you're headed south, it's on the right-hand side of the road. So what I would request is that you adopt a proposed resolution 2020-01 approving the Rancheria annexation. This has been long in coming for the tribe. So, and in the report, I've gone through the required analyses and recommend approval of it.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments?
Just a comment, this is, like John said, it's a long time coming, it's non-controversial, and it's really something should have happened a long time ago.
Anything else? So I do have two questions. One, I know it says there's excess water already of over 200,000 gallons or something like that. I don't know if it was per day, if I remember the, I think it was GPD. With the addition of this, and obviously thinking of all the fires that they've experienced out there, I don't know what that looks like as far as gallons per day. Is that enough to deal with any kind of large-scale fire with the addition of this? Obviously, it's enough to feed those houses for their needs, because typically, we just had a conversation yesterday that a typical household is about 40,000 gallons a year. So obviously, if you're over 200,000 gallons per day, you're good for the housing. I'm just checking in for the fire suppression. And also, is there any, I didn't see it in there, and maybe I skipped it over, is there any expansion of adding fire hydrants in the area? It does? Okay.
Yeah, and as far as the,
Okay, good.
as you recall, a couple of years ago, during the Butte fire, it is, I keep getting the Butte and the Valley fire mixed up because there were two counties I do LAFCo with. And, but anyway, a lot of the county only major infrastructure was damaged. It's all been reconstructed. The concern I have with, it's not with this project at all, it's with some additional projects. Maha is going to be proposing an annexation with several units for the workers for the Maha development, as well as the Rancheria is in the process of possibly looking at another parcel. And at that time, we need to address more capacity issues. And I know that since we really have worked on this, is the district is an additional well. So I think that's in pretty good shape. But as you know, with wildfires, you can have almost anything; it won't be good enough. So, I mean, what can I say?
Right. Can't prepare for everything.
That's the koala there.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Anything from the public? Please state your name.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Joanna Jen. I'm with Best and Krieger, and we represent the California County Water District. And we'd like to thank you and your staff for the wonderful work, for all your time and attention to this matter, and we urge approval of the annexation. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
I don't think there were any further questions unless other commissioners have anything new. All right, looking for action.
I move that we approve resolution 2020-001, a resolution making determinations and approving the annexation of 109.38 acres, more or less, to the California County Water District.
Second.
I have a motion and second. Can I please have a roll call?
Commissioner Scholes?
Yes.
Commissioner Archaki?
Yes.
Commissioner Saluten?
Aye.
Commissioner Matina?
Aye.
Commissioner Roby?
Aye.
And Sabatier?
Aye. Motion passes. Let's see. Thank you, Victoria. welcome back.
Thanks
Moving
for
on.
remembering. Thanks for remembering.
Yes. Moving on to item number 6, City of Lakeport, South Lakeport annexation. A, review letter mailed to the county and City of Lakeport and responses received. B, commission discussion regarding the process of completing an independent financial review and retention of an independent facilitator to resolve disagreements. C, provide direction and possible action to the executive officer regarding retention of an independent financial consultant and independent facilitator. Mr. Benoit.
Okay, thank you. I gave you the letter that was sent out to the city and the county regarding this matter. And both have replied. I don't have their responses in here, but the city wrote me a letter saying they will work with us in good faith. The county sent an email saying the same thing. What we have is, we have initially two economic studies prepared by two different economic consultants. And the two of them needs to be reconciled so that we have some direction going forward. That's one of the issues. The other is, there's a dispute regarding the 1997 tax resolution, and there's some letters that have gone back and forth on that. And at that point, once we reconcile these two economic studies, there'll be a facilitated session with the purpose of working toward a property tax sharing agreement, and a new one. And what this means is, once we have the property tax sharing agreement in place, then LAFCo is in a position, or we can notice a hearing and move on with this consideration of the annexation. So I contacted one economics consultant from Danville. His name is Mike Oliver. They've been involved in LAFCO issues and have done these kinds of studies before. And I'm very comfortable with him and his staff. And he comes highly recommended. He's the one person I have contacted. A lot of the people, Scott's friend works for one of the two firms, so he was out because I wanted someone totally independent who's got an extensive municipal finance background. So that's important. And so my thought was, well, I don't know if they really need to do a third study, but they need to reconcile the two with the differences, working with both the county and the city here, and working with the two consultants that already prepared the economic analyses, the one for the city and the one for the county. So once these get reconciled and we can agree on the base information, then it's time really to hold this facilitated session. And I think I'm going to punt to Scott, since he's an attorney, and attorneys have a large resource of facilitators, and I know he knows some, because I don't really that would have experience with this kind of thing. So, but that's the stage. So the first stage is, let's reconcile, let's get all the numbers correct. What is the effect of this annexation upon the city and the county? And what is the service obligations effect upon the city and the county?
Yeah, the consultants that we retain we will hope that he will try to work with the existing consultants for both the city and the county. And perhaps if they really work together, they might be able to come up with a version that all of them agree is it represents the most accurate assessment of the impacts on the county and the city relative to this annexation. However, the way it is set up is if the consultants for the two parties can't agree with our consultant, he's going to go ahead and say, this is what I recommend. So you'll have a neutral recommendation. But first he's going to try and hopefully make it a consensus recommendation. That, of course, is going to require the city and county to authorize their consultants to work with it. And we trust that they will do that. And that then the process, because it's requiring working together, it's going to necessarily take this consultant some time. I wouldn't be surprised if it took him 4 or 5 months to go through this process. But hopefully, in working with the consultants for the 2 counties, or the 2 agencies, they can come up with a consensus analysis, or if not, you will have an independent recommendation. Then, based on that, we would then set up a facilitated mediation between the parties, with the LAFCo president as well, to see if we can get the parties to work this out and get service to this area that needs it.
Any comments or questions about the direction that we're taking or want to take?
Mr. Chair, that seems like a reasonable way to move forward. Start with, see if we can build a consensus there from the 2 reports. I think fair and independent, I think, is the way to go. So, yeah, I think we're moving in the right direction. In favor of.
I have a couple
So I
of
just want to
housekeeping items.
be clear on that.
I have a question first, John. Does that mean when you're saying they come up with a fair agreement, are they like reviewing the old tax share agreement, or are they reviewing what the city offered the county, or are they just coming up with what they think is a tax share agreement that makes sense?
Well, I don't know that they're not coming up with a tax share agreement. They're coming up with an analysis of the fiscal impacts upon which an agreement can be based.
Okay.
The agreement itself will be prepared by legal counsel.
And that's part of the mediation after the fact.
Right. But what we're trying to do is provide a base document that is a good, solid, neutral base document that hopefully will assist the parties in reaching an agreement so that they can then prepare the legal document, which is the tax sharing agreement.
And
Gotcha.
just to clarify, it's a review of the application LAFCo received and the comments sent from the county about the application itself. It's not about the contract and the tax sharing
No,
agreement.
we're not, this has nothing to do with any existing
Right.
agreements.
Right.
This is to look, I mean, understand, you have an independent duty to look at all of this, if once it were to get to you. So in essence, this is both providing the parties information and information that the LAFCo itself would want to have when and if this gets to you. So I think it'll be useful information for all parties.
Any other comments or questions? And I just want to say that I concur that I think that this is a good direction to go. Yes, Suzanne?
I just had a question about the, it says after the completion of the analysis, then there would be representatives from the city, county, and LAFCo. So the representatives from the city could or could not be LAFCO members?
Well, I would think that, I mean, that's an interesting, I think we would want the LAFCO members to be different.
Right.
I don't think it would be fair to ask one of the parties who's also in LAFCO to keep switching hats.
Right. No, I agree that there would need to be somebody who's neutral in that situation as well, but representing LAFCo. Good question. Yes. I'm going to open it up for the public. Please come to the podium. I expected both parties.
Good morning, LAFCo members. Kevin Ingram, Assistant City Manager with the City of Lakeport. I also, too, want to applaud the efforts. I think this is a really good strategy for resolving this conflict. It's been going on for quite some time. I can comfortably say probably before I was born. But,
I may have been around for that.
Nonetheless, I just had a couple questions. I think, trying to fully understand the process moving forward. Scott, I believe you mentioned kind of a 4 or 5 month process. I think it's just important for both the city and the county from that standpoint You know, it's easy, we get stuck in the conflict of the agreement, and ultimately that comes about because of the tax sharing agreement, which, you know, like it or not, kind of is the subject of the tension, which I blame the state of California for, because the way the system's set up, it always pits us against each other when we really should be working with each other. But nonetheless, I think it's also important to remember that regardless if it's annexed or it stays with the county, there is a public health issue out there, most particularly with water. I've had the luxury of, or you know, you could say this luxury perhaps, of working on both sides of this issue in my time with the county and with the city. You know, regional water has some serious concerns with some of the small water systems that are out there. And they've kind of held off on some of their enforcement action because they were always sort of under the assumption that this would be annexed and eventually public water service would come in, which is, you know, the most ideal solution to some of those things. So I'm just trying to understand timing-wise, because regardless of county or city or whoever ends up having to put a public water system in there, timing-wise, another 4 or 5 months, and then the facilitation. I'm just trying to understand the process a little bit more. So you're saying, I mean, 4 or 5, it doesn't have to take 4 or 5 months if the consultants for the city and the county are able to meet with this independent one and reconcile those differences more quickly, which is what I hope can be done. Then we can bring on an independent facilitator and move to stage 2 quicker. Am I correct in my thought process there?
Oh, sure. I mean, there's no set requirement. It's just that I've had enough experience with consultants to know that they're not just sitting there playing solitaire waiting for you to call them. They have a backlog, and they'll put you in their track, but often they can't start for a month.
Correct. Local government folks are the ones that play solitaire. You know, consultants don't do that. No, but I mean, I just want to kind of make that point that it doesn't have to take 4 or 5 months if we can really, you know, the important piece, regardless of our differences, is to protect the public interest of the folks that are down in that area. And it would be my hope, and you know, I think the city certainly is committed, and I know the folks at the county are too, that we have to recognize that there are some public health issues in there, water, lack of you know, fire, you know, hydrants and other fire mechanisms in there. That it really there is an issue that needs to be resolved. So.
And I'd like to respond to that, and I'm kind of paraphrasing what the city of Lakeport and the county did by approving this letter. Is that's part of the good faith effort, I think, is not to stall the process, is to make sure that we're at the table, all of us, and working to find what is that consensus. And hopefully, if there's a consensus, that timeline would be shrunk by a whole lot. If there's not a consensus, then that's when it might be 4 or 5 months, who knows how long. But I would suspect that that's what the good faith effort should also provide, is some sort of efficiency in the process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree with that, and I want to put on the record, I think the city is prepared. We would like to certainly shorten that time period, and you know, we certainly get our consultant in place to work with both the county's consultant and the independent one that's selected by this one. So, thank you.
Good morning, Susan Parker, County of Lake. I just have a clarifying question. As with regards to our consultant, EAE, would the working together with the independent consultant and ADA, who will bore those costs?
Each party.
Each party?
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, I think LAFCo has agreed to shoulder the costs of our consultant, is that correct?
No, the facilitator, we agreed at the last time the city would shoulder the cost of the economics consultant.
Okay, so we would be paying the hourly for our consultant to work with the independent and AD, correct?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and I want to thank the county for their letter of support for good faith negotiations. Really appreciate this, and I also want to echo what Kevin's concern is about timing. It's really important for the businesses down there that need the water to get them. They've been waiting for a long time. Public health has put off shutting down some of those businesses if they don't get water, good water. And so anything we can do to move that quicker, we greatly appreciate it. But I also want to thank you very much for bringing this forward to this point where we are today. And also, I know it's a little bit off, but we also, in 4 years, the city's contract with the county to provide sewer out there is over with. So hopefully we don't get that far down the road where there's no sewer available either for those businesses down there. So thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I just had a question. When we're considering this, are we just looking at the tax sharing, or is the map going to stay the same? Because I've been involved in this long enough that I don't even know where the area is anymore, because it's changed. So is it just the tax sharing that we're looking at, or is it the whole thing again?
We're looking at the economic studies. We're not looking at the tax sharing agreement per se. That's an offshoot of that.
But it's about the money, it's not about where.
It's about the money and cost, service costs.
And the where is within the application that was submitted to LAFCo. Everything is precise as to what areas, what APN
That's the
numbers.
most recent one, though. It's
Yes,
gone and changed.
the one that we've received just recently.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And the idea, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, the idea is to look at what are the total numbers we should be looking at, so then those negotiations can be made based on those total numbers, because the idea is that each entity should remain whole.
So I conclude then that the two parties are in agreement about what the area is. It's just a question of how to divide up the money.
And I don't think it's an agreement of what the area is. That's the application that we have that was submitted to us. I don't think that I don't think that's under any kind of negotiations. The application is what's there.
Does anybody know when that was, what that date is on that application?
It was last year. I'm sure Lakeport would be able to tell us.
No, it was in the summer.
I think it was around August, September.
Yeah, I assume it was
August.
There you go. August 19th, 2019 application.
Thank you.
Yes. And it's very, very fluid and short read.
It says at this point 136.76 acres, more or less consisting of approximately 50 parcels. So that's what we have.
Any questions or comments?
You just made the comment about keeping each county and city whole.
Well,
Is that
the balancing of the total
so
numbers.
revenue neutral?
Yes,
Okay.
that's the correct terms.
Gotcha.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
Yeah, that does not mean that the numbers will remain the same. I mean, money is going to have to flow from the county to the city, so there will be a reduction in income to the county, and almost inevitably, unless some other source of enhanced revenue can be found.
Okay. So I like the plan of going directly to the person that you've had some experience with, that you know is well-skilled and knowledgeable in doing these types of reviews. I think that it would take more time if we went out and did like an RFP to find these types of individuals. And I trust that you know exactly what you should be looking for and what's needed for this circumstance. And so I'm okay with going directly with the individual that you've recommended. I want to make sure that the board is as well, that there's consensus from the board to move forward in that direction.
Is that the out of Danville, Mr. All?
Right, Mr. Oliver, right. Yeah, that was one of the housekeeping items I wanted to bring up is if you want to do an RFP at 6 months.
Right.
And it would have to come back here a couple of times. Well, actually, you'd have to approve the RFP, send it out, and then we would get responses. It would take 6 months by the time we're done. Okay, the other thing is contracting. We know the city is going to pay the costs. I looked at our balance sheet. The city does have some funds already on deposit with LAFCo. And so I would need to execute an agreement. The chair and I would actually. I believe I have some authority to execute an agreement for at least up to $5,000 to start. I believe the amount was $5,000. And the chair would be involved in this agreement. But I'll have to get some final costs because I don't know what the cost would be at this point. It's hard to tell. Impossible to tell, I guess is the word. So I would work with the chair in getting this consultant on board as soon as possible.
It may end up being a time and materials basis because it is hard to predict how far this has to go.
Depends how easy it is, or?
I mean, what we do is pick a dollar amount and then say, yeah, we'd have to come back to the commission to exceed that amount.
And actually, I'd like to open that back out to the public just to make sure the comment of RFP or no RFP, since it potentially has an impact on the city of Clear Lake, city of Lakeport. I want to make sure that I open it up back to the public to comment on this.
Yeah, we wholly support giving the direction to the executive director to go ahead and contract with who they believe is the best, and we will be there to finance the fiscal analysis that needs to be done. So as soon as we get that number, we'll work with the executive director on that. Thank you.
Could you go back to the microphone and state your name? We've never met you before.
Sorry, that Margaret Silvera, city manager for the city of Lakeport.
It's official. Anyone else?
Sure, I do have one comment. When we talk about independent, as far as the independent contractor, we're going to do this thing. The payment will be coming from LAFCo as a whole, so the contractor doesn't know who's paying the bill. Because we already have that situation where we've had 2 analyses done, one by the county, one from the city, which couldn't come to an agreement. That's why we're doing this. So just want to clarify, that the payment would be coming from LAFCo. So the independent contract, even though clearly, the city of Lakeport is paying it, so you understand the concern.
Right, the city of Lakeport would be depositing funds with the.
And it would be coming from LAFCO, the independent contractor.
Our contract will be with.
Okay,
It'll be our contract.
Clarification.
No, that's a good clarification. That makes sense for the question. So I believe we have consensus to move in that direction and to go ahead and initiate a contract, get that going. And so let's see, that was...
Point of clarification, that includes the facilitator?
No, that'll be something different. That won't be that expensive either. It'll be probably a 1 day or half a day facilitation. 1 day?
Well, I would hope so. If it's half a day, it's probably not going to be very successful.
So it's got to be 1 day, and that we'll worry about at a later point.
And the conversation about the facilitator, do we table that until later on, once we're getting closer to concluding this process? Okay, but there's a consensus as well to go with the contract and then go with the facilitator that LAFCo will be paying for. Okay, I'm getting a lot of nods and a lot of yeses, looking across the way as well to Suzanne and Victoria. Okay.
My only question is, do we need a motion or is consensus?
It says provide direction. If you want to make a motion, it would be official.
It says provide direction and possible action.
Okay.
Yeah, I would prefer a motion authorizing the staff to proceed.
Okay, then I would move that we authorize staff to proceed with this consultant agreement.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Thank you very much. on to item number 7, designate the Maha development in Southern Lake County as a complex project as provided for in section 2.1.2 and 2.2.2 of the Executive Officer's 5th Amended Agreement and section 2 of the 4th Amended Agreement for legal services. Mr. Benoit.
This Maha development is a huge project. Unfortunately, it seems like the projects we're getting lately are very complex. At least the Rancheria wasn't. And I've got another one that might not be. But this one is. This is an extensive, huge project. It includes the area around the Gwinnett Rancho and of course, on the Calliope, for the Calliope County Water District, there's another housing development that's part of this. So it is a pretty extensive project. It's one of the largest, if not the largest, Lake County's had in years. Homestake Mine might have been a bigger one.
I think ever, put it together, it's.
Yeah, it's a huge one. And so I've been in communication with Kirsty Shelton, who's running this project, and so I'm working with her on logistics.
And what does that afford us if we do designate this as a complex project?
Well, what it is that they're gonna pay for hundreds of hours of our time rather than the taxpayers. And that's the way it should be. I mean, I hate to blow our budget, our whole reserve on an individual project. And that was the purpose of this, is to prevent that from happening.
It allows us to spend more time on it than would be permitted under our existing contracts. And it will be billed to the LAFCo, but reimbursed by the developer.
So similar to community development, billing them for the hours.
Exactly. Except we like the money up front.
Usually things are easier this way. Any comments or questions? Yes.
I looked at some of the material online, and it stated that they were going to rely on Lakeport for their police services. I'm just wondering why they don't rely on City of Clear Lake. They cut their response time in less than half.
I would rely on the deputies.
No, I think
They may have been in the
something
county.
else. That's not true.
There's so many unknowns. This is one of the confusing factors. It's usually the sheriff's office that does it.
That's what I think their comment,
Yeah.
they're an unincorporated area, so that would be the sheriff's office.
Yeah.
Oh.
But understand, this is not an agenda item for discussion of the substantive issues. This
Okay.
is purely
About
procedural.
making it a complex
Yeah.
project.
Yeah, we had a discussion, presentation at the last meeting. So you got an
That was a good
idea of what
presentation.
this project involves.
Anything else on designating this as a complex project? All right. Do we have public comment? Nope. Coming back for motion.
I will make a motion to consider the Maha Group development project, or as a complex project.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Motion carries. Item number 8, authorize staff to attend the LAFCo annual staff workshop, March 24th through 27th of 2020 in Orange County, California. Mr. Benoit.
We have an annual staff workshop as well as an annual conference. And last year it was in San Jose, which was, in spite of it being in San Jose, it was a great staff workshop. And this one is in Orange County. I think it's at the airport. Anyway, this is the annual staff workshop. And the annual conference is in Monterey sometime in, I think, October this year. September or October, I don't recall. So, anyway, that's the item on the agenda.
Any comments or questions? From the public? All right, bringing it back to make a motion to authorize.
I move that we authorize staff to attend the LAFCo annual staff conference March 24th through 27th in Orange County.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item number 9, LAFCO 101 Part 2, presentation by LAFCO staff.
We have been putting this off for probably at least 6 months now. And if I can have a little bit of time to set up the overhead projector, we can continue on with the presentation. So
Let's take a 5-minute break while we set up the technology. And
I need Ed to help.
Since you can get things working, I can't.
What's the presentation from? Is it from your laptop?
It's on my laptop.
Because I'm wondering if you can connect directly to
Put it on the big
TV.
screen.
How do we do that?
Number 9, LAFCO 101 Part 2, presentation. All you, John.
Thank you. We did most of this presentation several months ago, and what we have today is just a few case studies, and they're very brief, and then just some conclusions. But if we want to go back to the beginning, I can do that also. But I think I'm getting this look from Scott, so I won't. So anyway, what it is when we do certain things, we use a lot of terminology in LAFCO. And one is a sphere of influence case study. I keep saying I need to update these case studies, but in reality, nothing's changed. The zero sphere, this is when LAFCO recommends that we have the district dissolved. And when we do a sphere of influence, as you know, the sphere is defined as the probable physical boundaries and service area of a local agency, as the commission determines. And we base it on a lot of information in a municipal service review. You know, after 18 years, they finally put a definition of service review into the LAFCO law. So government tends to move very slowly here. So, but there is, here's an example of a reclamation district, and problems were identified in the service review of inactive, it didn't participate in the levy program, subvention, does not file financial reports with the state controller's office. There's no adjacent districts around to assume the services by the reclamation district, and therefore consolidation with another isn't feasible. So the solution is that LAFCO updates the sphere of influence to be a zero sphere, sending us a signal that LAFCO would like to dissolve the district. A zero sphere means that zero territory is within the sphere of influence. So there's no sphere, the district is there, and it means the district shall be dissolved. And normally, when we dissolve a district like this, the county wraps up the financial affairs of the district, or and either returns money to landowners or whatever. So LAFCO at this point may dissolve the district. So a detachable sphere, this is when LAFCO recommends a detachment. And of course, this is the thing with the fire departments, is a fire district has a finger of territory that extends into the city of San Pablo, which is an incorporated area, and they have their own fire service. So service for the fire district to go into the city of San Pablo to serve is very expensive and inefficient for the district itself. And San Pablo has a an extensive redevelopment district that would give because of this redevelopment, this is a little dated now, but there wasn't very much revenue flowing into the fire district. So this LAFCO, this lack of revenue stood in the way of providing services. So the solution is that LAFCO adopts a detachable sphere. And a detachable sphere means that the territory within the boundary is excluded from the sphere. And this means portions of the sphere can be detached. So you have a shrunken sphere there. And LAFCO is not empowered to initiate a detachment, but recommends that a detachment be proposed. That's some things that we don't do. It would be nice to have LAFCO the power, but the legislature's never given us the power to do that. We can dissolve a district, but in certain cases, but not detach. So an annexable sphere, this is when LAFCO recommends an annexation to a district. And in this one, there's a portion of the county, the primary service provider is within the bounds of another fire district. And we've had that done before. In fact, I think I've got a situation between Yuba and Nevada County that's starting to rise up, where a Nevada County fire district is service. You heard about that. And so is servicing an area within Yuba County. And so we're going to be probably, the two LAFCOs are probably going to be working together on that situation. So in this case, Contra Costa LAFCO recently updated the sphere to be an annexable sphere. An annexable sphere means certain territory outside the district bounds is included in the sphere. And this means the area should be annexed to the district. And we're, again, not empowered to initiate annexations, but it has recommended that to the affected fire service providers and the public that an annexation should be proposed. A lot of times we'll get an application, especially is when a district wants something else. When they want something else, oh, by the way, you need to do this at the same time. So we kind of twist some arms, and that's what happens. So the basic procedures for a change of organization is annexation or detachment. We have the changes of organization are an annexation or detachment, formation of a new district, incorporation of a new city. We have not seen a lot of incorporations of new cities since 2009. Those that were incorporated were not very viable because of the triple flip. So, and the way the state allocates revenue, BLF revenue. The disincorporation of a city, dissolution of district. I always enjoy getting a phone call from somebody that wants to dissolve a district. And, you know, not to be flippant about it, but what I say is get your checkbook out, because it's not cheap. There's a lot of expenses, and the city council isn't going to pay for it, neither is the county. So when I get these questions, it's very interesting. But we do, there's disincorporations or dissolutions of districts, consolidations of cities or districts. We don't have that here. It's more urban area issue with consolidation of cities. Districts is another story. There are a lot of district consolidations going on around the state. Merger of a district into a city. That is, a lot of cities are reluctant to take on any more responsibility. And I had a situation in a city. I said, why don't you take over this district? Even do a subsidiary district like Lakeport has with the Lake, let's see, what is it? The Lakeport Municipal Sanitation District, I think is what it's called. And merger of a district into a city, subsidiary districts, which is a good if it meets certain standards, you can do that. Exercise a new or different function or classes of services by a special district. Used to be called a latent power, but now it's just a different function. And it'll also mean, I'll mention, a divestiture of a power. So you've got a community services district that does water, sewer, and fire, and say parks. Say they don't want to do parks anymore, or say they don't want to do fire anymore. Okay, they want to get out of the fire business. That's, I see that's more common. When we go through that, the one issue with that process of divesting itself of fires, we've got to find someone else who's going to take it. So you need to have a successor agency to provide that service. And that, a lot of times, is a real problem, especially when there's nobody to do it. So, and a reorganization is two or more changes of organization into one proceeding. An annexation to the city of Lakeport is an issue with the Lake County Sanitation District. So you have to dissolve, you take that area out of the Lake County Sanitation District and you put it into the city. So that's called a reorganization, because there's two changes going on.
John, if an agency wants to get rid of a district, who gets to make the decision? Like you said, there's nobody to pick it up, so is that decision LAFCo or the agency that's trying to get rid of it, or the?
Well, ultimately,
Who's responsible for, there's nobody to pick up the ball?
Yeah, we can't approve it if there isn't a.
So you just, that entity just has to keep it unless they can find somebody?
Unless we find the service is really not needed anyway, or there's some substitute non-governmental entity, but a fire protection district is a governmental, I use that as a, something on purpose.
Yeah.
More typically, when you have, when we're in a situation of looking at dissolution of a district, it's because the district isn't doing its job. And so there is no other agency other than perhaps the state pushing. It's really LAFCo. That's one of your critical duties, is if you see, your job is to look at that's why you look at the agencies in your county periodically through your MSRs. And if your MSRs indicate that an agency is not performing its duties, then it's really LAFCo is likely to be the primary driver of dissolving the agency and trying to get another agency to take it on. So, it's, I mean, the legislatures they really want LAFCOs to be doing more of that.
That's what the MSRs are for.
Yes. They identify these issues. The application to LAFCO, this is something that you rarely don't see. There's an application form that people fill out or a petition. One of the recent issues I've had with the application form in a couple counties is districts come to me and say, oh, we want to detach this area, or we want to annex this area. So they even go as far as to hold a public hearing. Maybe they're going to do that. They don't necessarily have to. So they file the application, spend all this money, have a surveyor prepare a map and a geographic description, and it gets to LAFCO. So we send the notices out to the public, to the landowners and voters out there. Well, inevitably, the landowners and voters say, "What's this? What's going on? What are you doing to us?" Yeah. And so I want to change our application forms within reason somehow to require an applicant to notify the public before it even gets to LAFCO. It might save them some money while they're at it, because these people may not want to be detached, or they may not want to be annexed. They can at least canvass maybe that's all it takes, is to canvass the area. So there's these sorts of things are always in flux. We're always changing things, noticing, getting the proper notice. Address labels from the county, it can be difficult, especially when the county changes staff. This county, not so bad. We had some problems with the elections office, but I think that's changed now since Diane came back and his assistant. There was a problem before with them ignoring us and sending notices to registered voters. That's important, and so hopefully they've turned the corner on that. The plan for, and the same happened with the assessor's office. They got a new guy, he's really good, so but the other person that was there retired after years. And so I have to deal with this, and I kind of get tired of prodding people. As I tell Kathy hears it all the time, I don't have to prod these people. Anyway, a plan for, they need to provide a justification why they're doing this, and a plan for services, a document, and this includes financial information, so kind of the who, what, where, why. An application they fill out, a maps and a map and meets and bounds or geographic description. I'm still in a constant argument with other LAFCos about whether or not a surveyor is required. I say absolutely. And so that's the position I take, is because it becomes a document that's recorded legally, and there's these descriptions out there that need to be written by a licensed surveyor. So, and that's our standards, always has been in Lake County. So that for years, so that's a good standard. A tax sharing agreement is required. There's no master tax agreements in the county, so this process can take a long time, as you all know. City annexations, pre-zoning ordinance, an environmental document is required. LAFCO fee and fee deposit, economic studies, there's all kinds of other things that can be required on a case-by-case basis. Water supply analysis, that's one of the things. Normally, to meet muster with CEQA, an applicant will provide a water supply analysis, and that's done like the Maha development, they've done that already.
I don't know if it's in the next slide, but another critical aspect of the application is an indemnification agreement. There has to, we insist that all applicants agree to indemnify LAFCO should their action be challenged later. So that is a critical part of the application. And it's also important, we look to the agency which is sending us a resolution of application to be the indemnifying party, not the property owner. They typically, the city, for example, will have its own indemnification agreement with the developer. So, but we don't want to have to deal with the developer. We want to deal with the agency that submitted the resolution of application, because the agency is much more likely to be there. The developer could file bankruptcy tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. So on LAFCO review, we accept the application, and what this is a problem with accepting petition applications and not resolution applications, is when you get landowners applying, the agency that's of concern doesn't have any really power or authority. And so what we do is really encourage a resolution of application. That was one of the problems with the Middletown annexation that occurred in 2015. The first one, it was filed by directly by the rancheria. The second one that occurred today was filed by the Caledonia County Water. And the Caledonia County Water, as a result, refused to negotiate a tax sharing agreement, so it killed it. So anyway, we got that done. But it really is important to do it by a resolution more than a petition. I'm very leery of a petition unless it's one or two lots that somebody wants to come in and we get a letter from the city or the district saying, yes, we support this. So we really would encourage resolutions put forth by the governing board of directors from a district. So we review the applications, supporting materials, and the plan for services, the maps, the geographic description, CEQA documentation, and whatever. And then we, after everything is complete, the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, we issue a certificate of filing, put a notice in the paper, and at this point there is a time period, and I'm not sure that's correct, at 90 days. The clock really starts 60 days from the time you open the public hearing. So you got 60 days there. I guess that 90 days is there, but you've got that 60 days that you need to, once you issue a certificate of filing. We do that for, say we do it for Lakeport, we have to make a decision in 60 days, unless somebody agrees to waive that.
I don't see the 90 days, John. Where is it?
I got issued with documentation deemed the 90-day clock.
Oh, the
clock
third
starts.
one.
Okay, right at the end. Okay, sorry.
And so the 60 days is the important timeline that we have. We have a public notice. It's a 21-day notice for a public hearing. They co-opted that from the CEQA law, I think, back when they did that. We also have an enhanced noticing. We have to notify adjacent landowners who really don't have any standing in annexation, or adjacent voters, which seems to be absurd. But I don't like that part of it. It's in the rules, and you have to follow that. So Lakeport will be having to notify adjacent landowners also. And then we have an executive officer's report recommendation, and it's distributed 5 days prior to the hearing. So that's just for the review, and your commission, what you do is you review, approve, or deny. Terms and conditions are permitted, and there's a specific parameter of what you can do in the LAFCo law. We determine an effective date. That's important. Well, when is this going to actually take effect? The CEQA determination, normally we don't like to be the CEQA lead agency because it can get really expensive. We want the responsible, or the lead agency, to be the district or city. And that's important. Reconsideration is...
John, I think you have a question.
Yeah, John, I just had a question about that landowners and voters.
Yeah.
Do they have the same rights? Because I thought in an annexation it was just the voters in the area that was being annexed that could...
Depends if there's 12 or more registered voters.
Voters, okay.
That has something to do with it. We notify both of them within the area.
Right.
And if there's less than 12 voters, then they'll end up being a landowner vote, essentially.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
More than 12 owners, then it'll be a registered voter vote. And what's really kind of interesting is the Lakeport one is 140-something acres. Lots of businesses out there, and 16, at this time, 16 registered voters.
Okay.
So that makes it an inhabited. So the 16 people are going to have a say-so. I don't know if they have any vested interest in any of the businesses out there, but anyway, it's kind of quirky.
Got another question on that. I don't know if you've ever read into this or not, but let's say that there's an annexation proposed and the maps are drawn and everything is submitted, and then you notify the surrounding landowners, and one of the landowners says, hey, that sounds pretty good. I want to get my property annexed in there too. What do you do?
Well, we can do that. We add them in.
Okay. They have to pay for the paperwork and the additional survey and everything?
Yes, we want them to pay for, we did that in one in Middletown before, where we added a couple of people in on that.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of
The
it.
district had a meeting at the senior center and asked everybody south of Middletown, where we were at the time, that's why everything started, was, hey, does anybody, we're gonna be doing this, does anyone want to annex it? We had a public meeting right at the senior center. And I think a couple people did besides what you guys took in today.
And so we do that. I know we got to a hearing on that Valley
Oaks.
It was north of Middletown, that
Valley
large.
Oaks.
Yeah, that's Valley Oaks.
Valley Oaks. And somebody wanted to annex at the hearing, so we postponed, we continued the hearing, and we said you gotta pay for the maps, or we included them in. We approved it, but the maps and descriptions had to be changed to accommodate that.
Makes sense.
So, a LAFCo decision can be reconsidered, and again, anyone in the world can request a reconsideration. And I wish that were changed in the law, Scott, that we limit who can consider reconsideration, because if you're an unaffected landowner that lives not in the area, what's it to you? So what you do with a reconsideration is if items weren't brought up during the normal process, you can request that reconsideration be given to consider these facts, and that perhaps the LAFCo decision could be amended. And so there's a time period, 30 days to do that. And that sets forth a bunch of other time periods, so it takes a while.
Reconsideration is actually usually a pretty helpful item, because sometimes people, even though we send out notices, sometimes they show up at the hearing just totally unaware and with major issues that, and no one really has time to absorb it. So then they can use reconsideration as an opportunity to bring forth new information that could very well affect your decision, so that you can give a better decision on reconsideration. We've oftentimes in the past used reconsideration as an opportunity, frankly, to avoid litigation by cleaning up the prior decision, so that it's much more legally defensible. Because you can't always anticipate that there's someone going to show up and challenge what you're doing until you get to the hearing. And that can make a big difference in the degree of scrutiny and supporting documentation. So reconsideration can be quite helpful, and my recommendation, and John's in the past, has been to be pretty liberal in allowing reconsideration as long as they do it within 30 days, they do the request within 30 days. And and for you to have broad scope on reconsideration, not stick to technical formalities and require them to prove that they have something new to offer.
Normally, 99%, that's exactly what happens, but a lot of unscrupulous residents or people that are next to an application area may want to build the record. And so they ask for a reconsideration, build the record, and then their intention is to file a lawsuit. So they built the record.
Right, but we're also allowed to build our record at the same time.
Right.
So I view it as generally putting us, in most cases, in a better position should there be ultimately litigation.
Yeah, and of course, a reconsideration does take a lot of, because of that, it's very costly.
But with the reconsideration, are you changing the whole thing, or are you just tweaking it? Are you? In other
You're
words, you
probably
made your
tweaking it.
decision, now we can add and subtract without going back to square one?
No, but you could change, you completely reverse your position.
Oh, okay.
Or amend it. And we did that. Scott and I, we've done that a couple times where we've changed things. And once we denied someone entirely. So it just depends. Okay, so proceedings lapse from 1 year. So we approve an annexation today. They have a year to meet all the conditions. If they don't meet the conditions, they need to do an extension. We had to do that with Clear Lake Oaks and the merger of Paradise Cove. A few years ago, we did some extensions. And so they lapse within a year. A lot of times we'll have a protest hearing. This is, in some instances, no hearing is required. And this is when you have 100% landowner consent, or you send out notices that if you don't provide written notice by the end of the hearing, we're going to we're going to waive what we call the conducting authority proceedings. So there's special provisions for island annexations, which is not an issue in Lake County. So when there's a protest hearing, we don't have 100% landowner consent, and we need to publish a notice in the paper, and we need to notify everybody and mail notice to everybody. And that can get very expensive for a protest hearing. And in this case, you may delegate the conduct of a hearing to the executive officer. That's typically what's done. Most of my experience with protest hearings is that nobody ever shows up, even the people filing for them. I mean, sometimes it happens. Anyway, it just depends, but yeah, I remember one time nobody showed up and I figured, oh my God, these guys spent all this money doing this stuff. And so, anyway, so we have to determine the majority protest, depending if it's an uninhabited, inhabited. We still send the documentation to the registrar of voters and the assessor to determine the valuations. And we go from there and determine if there's sufficient protest to have an election. And if there's a lot of protest, over 50%, then the LAFCo proceedings are ended. So, and a lot of times we'll have to do a resolution affirming the protest results.
The protests can get a little complicated at times depending on, because there are different procedures for different kinds of changes of organization. For example, for certain kinds of consolidations, protests have to be counted separately and each agency proposed for a consolidation. Whereas in a dissolution of a district in annexation to another, which achieves the same result as consolidation, the protests don't require the same dual count. So there's, in fact, this whole area of protests for us can be quite a complicated issue in figuring out exactly which provision applies to a particular change of organization, particularly when it is a reorganization involving multiple changes. Then you have to look at the protest provisions for each of the 3 or 4 changes of organization that you're combining. So,
and who is the applicant? That's another thing. Is it LAFCo or is it an agency or citizens? That makes it, there's just a lot of changes. The legislature keeps promising to take this up.
well, actually, LAFCo has been working on revising the protest procedures, but it's such a huge job that it's going slowly. We have a committee working on it, but it's slow.
Did I miss the election? The city or the county will conduct elections if they're required. And, usually they're mail ballots, or we put it with a regular election or a special election. And the votes needed, it just depends. It's usually a majority vote to go one way or the other. 2/3 votes required when you have a Prop 218 issue involved. And that's on the actual tax itself, special tax. And the election expenses, who pays? It's the applicant normally, or in this case. Yeah, so.
This is important for agencies to keep in mind because these expenses have gotten more and more expensive. We had a situation in Butte County where the city of Gridley wanted to annex 12 properties. We proceeded to approve the annexation, but there were people who were not happy with it. And in the protest process, they went around and proceeded to get over 25% to demand an election. And then when the city of Gridley found out that it was going to cost them $10,000 through the elections department to run this election, they wanted to cancel the annexation. So it's something that does come up as an issue.
If you've gone that far through the process, can they cancel it?
Well, I had to issue an opinion that basically said, no, once the commission is active, there's no withdrawal by the agency.
Yeah, in fact, if I remember conversations, LAFCO's, a lot of times they used to send out these notices and do these elections themselves, but I don't think that meets any muster in today's world. So, and who pays? Of course, the city does, or the district. Okay, and after all of this is done and everything is is great. We record a certificate of completion, including the resolution and the map and description. And the tax sharing agreement also is a good process, a good idea to record that along with it, so everybody knows.
The notice of completion is the final action. It is that is the signal that the change of organization is complete and final. And that can be delayed because the LAFCO is oftentimes, if you have conditions that you want to see accomplished before the annexation is complete, we will hold off filing the certificate of completion until those are met. A real common one is that the line that for the new annexation is only going to take in part of a parcel, so they have to complete a subdivision of the property so that there is a separate legal parcel within the annexation area. And so we would just wait until we got the notice of the final recorded subdivision map before we would file the certificate of completion. But I've seen certificates of completion. We have one in our certificate of completion in Butte County for the city of Chico is waiting 5 years because they asked for a 5-year delay in order for them to develop the fiscal wherewithal to take in the annexation area.
You'd think they would have done that first.
Well, no, LAFCO would put it pressuring them because these are islands that should have been in the city years ago. The city is putting sewer through the islands, but didn't want to actually annex them. It wanted to provide sewer to them without annexing them, which of course would lead to them never being annexed. So we got in quite a dispute with them and basically threatened to sue them, and finally they agreed to annex the property, but they asked for, and quid pro quo was give them time before it actually, they had to go in and provide all the services.
I would just like to mention, I think I've mentioned this before, it can take state agencies forever to get the message about these things. The RCDs were consolidated in 2016, and we're still getting messages from some of the agencies wanting filings from some of the dissolved from East Lake RCD.
Yeah. So once this certificate of completion is done, there's a short appeal process that someone can sue LAFCO, but we record a statement of boundary change with the state after a period of time, and we notify all affected agencies and interested parties. Mostly, I should say, local agencies and interested parties. We don't inform state agencies, but we do unless someone is specific about it. So what we look at when we review a proposal: logical progression of boundaries, adequate agency service capacity, need for services, fiscal issues, impacts on other agencies, compliance with the statute policies, public comments, consistency with the appropriate general plan. And I got another case study here, which you're all familiar with. It's a Lakeport annexation that occurred. The city had applied for an annexation of this area that's west of where the current one is. And it was a logical area. It was in their sphere that the city to expand out there. And the city prepared an environmental analysis. They did everything they were supposed to do. LAFCO reviewed and commented on the environmental document during the process, but days before the hearing, the regional board issued a cease and desist order and a connection ban on the city. And that kind of stalled everything right there because at this point at the hearing, we couldn't find that the city had the capacity to have a sewage treatment process because they had a connection ban. So the city engineer had to work with the regional board and finally resolve the issue. And when those were clarified, the board and And when the issues were clarified, the city and LAFCo did consider the annexation and approved it. So, and this is an area that's west of, kind of southwest of the city. The conditions of approval, we added conditions in, is that they detach from the county sanitary district, that the ban, the cease and desist order was lifted, and we allowed a waiver of protest proceedings. If I remember, the boardroom was full when we had that one. So a lot of concerned citizens, they were all given proper notice, nobody protested. One of the things that can happen is city fees and assessments are kind of brought into the annexation territory. And so that was a determined condition. And we adopted the findings in the city's environmental review. And that, again, the applicant, which would be, in this case was the city, had an obligation to indemnify LAFCo. So this is another
John?
Lake County one. I'm almost done.
I was going to ask you, how much longer do we have?
I'm almost done. And we can get to the policies at a next meeting.
Okay.
So the consolidation of East Lucerne Park and Recreation District, Clear Lake Oaks Fire, and Upper Lake Fire Protection. This was a consolidation of 4 fire districts. This doesn't happen elsewhere in California that I've seen. Well, it does, I guess, in a few places, but mostly rural California, no. There was some new legislation that allowed us to consolidate different types of districts, in this case a CSD, a fire protection district, and a park and recreation district. And so these form the north, before the annexation went to LAFCo, they formed a fire protection authority, which is a JPA, to agree to work together. And there was a 3-year trial period for them, and they standardized a lot of things, and it got to LAFCo, and LAFCo approved the consolidation of the districts. So we transferred all the fire districts to the North Shore Fire, the employees, dissolution. Employees is one that's worth noting when you're consolidating districts, is what type of benefits do you have? And there's some consideration that needs to be done for employees in some cases. So the process is we can approve, condition, or deny. We have broad authority to develop conditions. Some districts, some projects, new cities, and sometimes districts are subject to election. They had a provision that if you were going to dissolve a district, healthcare district, that you had to have an election. That was removed from the law, I think, this year. So just things like that.
An interesting one is we were looking at one of our irrigation district in Nevada County was looking at the possibility of taking over PG&E's assets within Nevada County. And there is a specific statutory section that says that if you're taking over land services provided by a utility that has a PUC certificate, that you have to do an election.
Oh.
Needless to say, PG&E's lobbyists got that through years ago to make it as complicated a process.
When that happened with SMUD too, when they wanted to take over West Sacramento, there was a proposal for the municipal utility district to do that. And they had to have an election, and of course, as a public agency, they couldn't spend any money advertising. So PG&E, I mean, threw a lot of money at this. And the voters turned it down. Foolish, but they turned it down anyway. all of these projects are subject to a protest of the election, so protest of the process. So LAFCo's function is quasi-legislative. We balance competing interests. Our decisions must be consistent with our policies. The broad discretion, we have very limited jurisdiction, but we have a very broad discretion within that little bit. We have planning responsibilities, spheres and service reviews. They didn't come into the LAFCo law until 15 years after it was, the spheres, until 15 years after the LAFCo law was approved by the legislature. Municipal service reviews came in, I think, 35 years later. So it's kind of slow. Government moves slow. So LAFCo acts as an independent referee among agencies and is distinct from city, county, and special districts. And all our processes are public, and that's it.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments for John?
Thank you for the education.
Yeah, thank you for the
And
presentation.
also, I believe this PowerPoint is posted on our website.
There will be an exam in the next class.
Nice. Nice.
That's right, we're gonna come up with some esoteric questions that we couldn't answer.
All right, item number 10, the policy standards and procedures. Do we want to table that for our next meeting? I'm seeing Scott nodding. Okay.
Policies and procedures, tabling it to the next meeting.
And they can take forever.
And then we'll move on to the executive officer's report.
And I have a whole bunch of things here. I'm working with Upper Lake Water District for their service review and sphere, and keep talking about it, but I met with them recently, and they're kind of slow at getting me information, but it's also an education process for the district. And of concern over there is they have a sphere of influence, but they really don't have much ability to serve people outside of their district. In fact, there's a lot of vacant land within the district. So that's an issue that we'll probably be looking at. And I don't know how to exclude it from these properties are already in the district, and there's no other water service provider. So what has to happen is when somebody wants to develop in that district, they're going to have to provide some more source capacity and a lot of other things. So the Canocti County Water District, I'm working with them also on the same thing. Their district is, that'll be coming up probably this spring, I'm hoping. The Cemetery District, MSR, I've not really gotten much on it, but I want to keep it on the radar screen because I've been doing other things. There's some issues with cemetery districts, and if you're a reader of the Public Cemetery Alliance, I did an article for them recently on consolidations. So, and I know there are some Lake County, I got drafted.
Good job.
And we'll blame it on Mark Marshall, who we did with, and then Bob Hunt, their attorney. So anyway, what the problem is these districts are not viable. And the problem is they're gonna have to think of doing business differently. A lot of them. And it's a statewide problem.
And I apologize, John, I was focusing on turning off the TV so it wasn't a distraction. How far along are you on the Canocti County Water District?
I've got a draft written. I'm just doing the maps. There was some issues where Dave Hughes called me. You might know Dave. And he, him and Frank, I wanted to work with some of the area that's in one of the mutual water companies that it be included in the Canocti County water. So.
Because I know that there's been some, not infrastructure changes, but I know he's aiming for a grant, and I'm wondering if that's part of the knowledge that you have of what he's already working on. Because I know that the county helped him obtain a piece of property to be able to get that infrastructure going.
Right, is that the one? That's not the one. Yeah, he's been talking to me about that. We wanted to include that in the sphere. there's an annexation that's kind of been pending for years out there at Clear Lake Oaks, and we put them off for a long time because we wanted to complete the Paradise Cove annexation or consolidation, annexation. And so apparently he called the district manager, and I discussed this. And I said, what about this, this, and this, and this? And so I guess she relayed the message, and eventually we're going to get the information back so that Mr. Carlisle can file an application to annex to the district. And I said, well, we're going to annex this, but the way what he's proposing is going to require some detachments also. So, or detachment of area, and possibly a sphere amendment. So, anyway, we'll see. There's another committee, if we don't have too many, the Redevelopment Oversight Committee. This is kind of an important committee, especially those in the North Shore area where we mentioned the North Shore Fire Protection District formed, and about a year later, the county had approved the redevelopment agency and diverted some of their tax revenue. And so I remember the chief wasn't too happy about that. So anyway, the governor several budget years ago abolished redevelopment agencies, and in 2018 since LAFCo has a way of recruiting for special district members, we send notices out, and we have ballots, and people get elected to be seated on LAFCO as a special district member. The state decided to give LAFCO the responsibility of doing a recruitment for the Redevelopment Oversight Committee. So I had to do a recruitment, or I'm doing a recruitment for this committee. The person that's the chair of it is Kelly Cox, so they have a real knowledgeable person that runs this thing. And so Kelly and I, we've been going back and forth and getting this done. And so he's telling his oversight committee that we need to appoint a special district member. The purpose of the oversight, overall purpose, is to allocate these revenues that were and finish up the business of these redevelopment agencies. We're required to have one in Lake County because we're more than one redevelopment agency here. So that it falls within that category. So we're looking for a special district member to be seated on that. And so the ballots are out. You have a copy of the notice in your packet. If you know any board member from a special district, the board of directors of that district has to appoint or has to nominate someone to serve as the special district rep. And if I get one, good enough, then I'll just give it over to Kelly. But if I get two, then we have to hold an election. And so I'm hoping we don't get two. But there was a guy from Lakeport Fire that was on it, and he is no longer on the board. And so we have to go through this process, and it was just one of these things that the legislature decided to give LAFCO a role in this. I'm surprised they didn't. They probably proposed that LAFCO run the whole thing, but I would think Kelly's quite a bit more qualified to do that. So that's good. So that is, it's kind of an important committee. They're only going to meet a couple times. And they have to take care of some stuff.
I'm the vice chair with Kelly. We have a meeting on 29th.
Oh, you are on that. Yeah, if you know of any special district member from, any of your districts, let me know. I mean, have them get their board of directors to appoint them. I don't think they pay anything. Maybe you would know that. No, I doubt it. But
not that I know of, unless everybody else does.
Right.
We only meet once a year right now, though. It is the wrap-up session on the whole thing. So.
Yeah, and you're going to make some decisions this month.
Yes,
and,
January 29th we have a meeting.
Right, and so just get the word out to those other district members. And of course, we got a couple of special district members, three of them over here. maybe one of you might be interested.
Well, I'm thinking, looking at the time frame here, we just had our meeting. So we couldn't nominate anybody till February.
Yeah, well, if you nominate them late, fine with me, because I have a feeling I'm not gonna see any.
I don't know that there'd be anybody who'd want to do it, but.
Well, it's a volunteer, there's only gonna be a few meetings of this committee, but I think it's important to have special districts have a seat at the table. So, because a lot of it affected them earlier, so. So the city member alternate rotation, it's now rotating to the city of Clear Lake. It's been 2 years that Ken Barlett was on the commission.
Is that as of today?
No, it's as of the date of the city select committee meeting. The two mayors get together and they select who's gonna sit on LAFCo as well as other, usually what happens, city of Lakeport and Clear Lake get one member and they rotate every 2 years, the alternate. And now it's come to Clear Lake. It's Clear Lake's turn for a 2-year term. They're gonna meet soon.
We already did.
And you already determined the alternate?
No, but between the two mayors.
Oh,
Well, we thought that it was, obviously Kenny's not here because he thought it was already
Well, he's
passed.
on the committee until the city select committee selects somebody else.
Yeah, I remember Maria and myself having that meeting
2 years ago.
2 years ago,
Yeah.
something like that.
So, I don't know, are you the mayor this year?
no.
No. Anyway, the two mayors will meet and they will determine who's gonna do that, this select committee, and who's gonna be on the APC and a few other countywide committees around here. And, they probably also do the redevelopment committee for all I know. So, but they're gonna convene a meeting soon. And your 700 forms are due on April 1st. So, anyway, those are things that you need to, we've been filing them with the county all these years, so, in Lakeport, so. And our next meeting is in March, so it'll be time to file expanded statements if you're on the city or the county or otherwise, or special districts, or if you're the public members, you just have to go up to the, I guess it's the clerk auditor. They've been accepting.
Well, the elections office doesn't.
They used to.
They don't.
And then they switched over to the clerk auditor. Who knows if they moved it back or not? There's a lot of changes going on.
Move to electronic, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've gone
Well,
electronic, which
last one
nobody
I
can
found.
understand.
Yeah, last
Oh,
week,
yeah, we just go.
just a couple years ago, they moved to electronic.
I know, I never could understand it. Their system was so buggy. Maybe I'll try it again this year.
It's not easy.
They give me a password, it never works, and so I just give them a physical copy. Here it is.
Yeah, it still works, it always does.
Where do we get the forms?
Online at
Okay.
ppc.ca.gov. PPC
They
website.
send you a whole packet, it's like 900 pages.
All you need is the top two.
All you need is the
All you need is a
3
few
or
of the
4, depending on
forms.
what you're doing.
Yeah, that's right.
The rest is all explanation and legal terms as to why you have to do what you have to do.
Yeah, if you have any conflict of interest, please call them, but I don't think I'd let them know if there was something we were doing.
That's gonna be off the record.
Talk to the city attorney.
There you go.
Where do we go online for that?
fppc.ca.gov.
Political practice.
Again?
FPPC, Fair Political Practices Commission, .ca.gov. And you need to file them probably with your district and for LAFCo and any other committees, government committees that you're on.
Okay. Thank you for your report. Any questions on anything that was presented? Scott, any council report?
Nope.
Okay. Any commissioner reports? Item number 13. Seeing none, Any correspondence? I didn't see any in the packet.
Yeah, none that I just want to show you anyway.
All right.
There's a lot of it, sounds good.
Did you receive some love, Dale?
The only one is that redevelopment committee. I think that's important.
Right, right. All right, so we will adjourn today's meeting. Next regular meeting will be Wednesday, March 18th, 2020 in Lakeport at City Hall. Thank you, everybody.